Right, so now that we've got our swatches in place, and just as a reminder, these are the Cardi cotton rag paper swatches, A8 size. You could use any other paper substrate for that. I just really like this as it's very absorbent, and I really like to work on it. Some people have different paper favorites, so use your favorite paper stock. So we've pulled together our materials earlier on, and I'm going to start by bringing in a couple of colours to start with. For each swatch, I'm going to combine a couple of different things. To begin with, we're going to explore colour. So these three swatches are all about exploring colour. The colours that I've chosen are those inspired by the essence of the ocean, basically. Lots of different hues that you might see at the seaside, from your kind of deep, rich ultramarines to your iridescents, you know, those moments where the sunshine is dancing on the horizon line of the sea. The storm grey, perhaps capturing that stormy sky that we sometimes find. Some high flow acrylic in teal, or bleu lagon, and some a deco art metallic, which is in champagne colour, and some Wedgwood de la Rowney. So I'm going to pair these up and take them 2 by 2 and experiment with how the mediums kind of explore each other when they're on the swatch. Why are we doing this? We're wanting to look at how the materials interact with each other and how you get that kind of coastal fluidity that you would find, and is kind of absolutely symbolic of the sea. Absolutely, when you see it, you think you feel sea-like, you feel ocean bound. So we're going to go in with this first top left swatch, and you can choose any materials. This first is the just standard acrylic paint, and I'm just going to go in with a brush just to begin with. And basically this is a test in sort of not overthinking it, essentially seeing what happens when you put paint to paper. Instinctively, I've kind of, what's come out of my brush here is a sort of wave-like pattern. It's quite wet. I'm going to now add on the acrylic ink and see how it responds and reacts as I put that on. Lovely. So you see this very exciting movement of ink flowing through into the lighter acrylic paint here. I think I'm quite excited about this. I'm going to add it in here as well. This is using a dropper, which is always quite interesting to get different marks as you go. I do find sometimes that these will bleed to the side of the swatch, but that's okay. Mother Nature can't be contained. So I'm going to add a couple of points here of water. Great, I'm quite happy with that. The next step for each of the swatches, you want to sort of remember what you've done, because you'll come back to it and think, okay, I really love that effect. And if you haven't made a note of the experiment, you won't know how to kind of learn more about it or use it in another setting. So there's a couple of ways of doing it, which is that you can draw to the side with an arrow that you've got acrylic ink and ultramarine, the colour, and make a mark of Wedgwood acrylic paint. Sometimes I like to make a note of the order that I've put them on. So first I put paint, then number 2 I put water, number 3 I put on the acrylic ink. The other thing is that you can write some of these notes. If you don't have one of these palette boards, you can you can add the notes around the masking tape as well, and just sort of carefully cut around before we go to the point of taking the masking tape off. So you can make a note in these borders if you don't have one of these boards. Okay, so I'm going to clear away those two mediums, and we're going to go now in for an iridescent high viscosity acrylic paint, and it's super shiny and sort of brings the magpie out in me, this particular color. It's just an acrylic paint, and then I'm going to use similar gestures but bring in some alcohol ink, which is a Jackson Storm Grey. So I think what I'm going to do for this is think a little bit differently about how I'm going to apply that colour. I'm going to put a little bit, instead of a brush, I'm going to bring it in on a palette knife and see how that changes things as we go. Whoops, not too much more in here at this point. So spreading it on. I'm going to go from a different corner, different place. And before we add the colour, if we sort of imagine ourselves coastal, sitting on the beach, what are we seeing? How are we feeling? I'm going to bring in some marks here, just by scraping back some of the pigment. Sorry, scraping back some of the paint, sorry. So what I'm thinking is that it will make kind of ridges in the paint there, reminiscent of a wave, although not exactingly like a wave. I'm going to add then the Storm Grey alcohol ink, if I can get it open. Come on. Right, here we go. I've just blotched a bit there, whoopsie, but didn't make it onto that one. But it wouldn't have mattered if it had, it would have been a happy little accident. So where shall I go with this, I wonder? I think I'm going to go directly in here. And I'm also going to see if adding a bit of water, what that sort of does to our ink, if anything, as we add it on in that combination. It's attached itself to some of the pigment of the acrylic paint as well, which is quite interesting. So I'm going to lift a little bit here of the acrylic ink from the palette knife, go back over the top. It's quite an interesting effect. So again, it's a sort of note to self, an aid memoir. So when it comes to translating and moving these swatches over to your sketchbooks, you know what you've done and in what order. So number one, and by the way, this really easily rubs out, so that you can do this multiple times on these lovely wooden palette boards. Number one is the iridescent green blue. Can't spell iridescent. Green, blue, acrylic. And then we went in with the number two, Storm alcohol ink. I'm actually quite tempted to, now it's sort of found its way, add a little bit more in. Why not? Add it more in there, in that corner there, where it had just mainly water, mixed with a tiny dash of the acrylic, and see what happens if it tries to then find its way into the different cracks and crevices. You can also do things like tip your palette. Equally quite good fun to do this with a canvas or any other substrate with some water, and see what happens using the actual element itself, the water itself, to kind of create. We've got this guy's trying to run off over here just to get things exciting. So this isn't wanting to move, but this is really wanting to move. So this is quite good fun. So you can move around your palette board, and it kind of is fun to look at the different effects that makes. Third and final colour combination that we're going to look at is a high flow green. So we're looking in for two kind of things going on here: the combination of what the materials do when they're kind of either fighting with each other or working with each other, but also looking at how we are looking at the combination of colors and how one makes another sing or makes another shout, depending on the close combination of the two. So I think at this stage I'm gonna go and try for a feather, something of the beach that I've found, which is I think this is a herring gull feather, and they're just lovely items. I kind of partly don't want to put it in the acrylic ink, but I will. So not acrylic ink, the acrylic paint. I'm going to possibly use this for mark making, possibly this end and that end, but let's see how it goes. See how much I've also got in here. Let's see. Oh yes, have fun with this. Whoops. Great. It feels vibrantly coastal already, and very excited about that. That's a pattern I wouldn't have been able to achieve without that kind of organic contribution, I think. I really like that. And that the boldness of the teal against the kind of starkness of the white is something that we're quite used to seeing at the seaside, isn't it? The kind of the foaminess of the breaking wave. Right, so then I'm going to add in this deco art. It's called Multi-Surface Acrylic Paint, and it I don't know if you can see on here, I'm going to use this to show you that it's a kind of iridescent gold. So I'm going to bring this in and just sweep it across. Sweep it across here. Lovely. Whoa, yes. And I'm gonna, as I did with the palette knife before on this swatch, kind of make some marks as we go across here. Lovely. Just sort of feel your way around. There's no right or wrong, and it's not about sort of copying these as such, but these are sort of ideas about how you just be bold in applying the colour and the mediums. Have fun with it, and you know, you go wild basically, because what's the worst that can happen? Nothing can really go wrong at this stage, because it's all about experiments. And the thing is with experiments is at the end of it, you got to kind of assess, did the experiment work? Did it not work? I mean, parts of it will, parts of it won't. You will use some of the experiment, the colour combinations again, you will use some of the different mark making again, you will use the different combinations of medium again. And actually there's something in the spontaneity of all of those things, and the spontaneous approach to it, very much of that feels very much elemental, very much of the ocean. You know, it's a living, breathing thing that just evolves. So remembering to make a note of these lastly, and putting in what we've done here is feather. And actually over here I forgot to add that I used a palette knife, so I'll add that there. Palette knife, feather, and we used high flow teal, and we also used metallic gold on top acrylic. So these are just some examples of where you might take it, just to get you going, with combinations of mediums, combinations of colour, to get you excited about kind of reflecting on a coastal marine environment.